Tonight we continue in our devotional series on Satan. And tonight we're going to be looking at where is Satan's domain. And we're going to be in Job chapter 1. Just to sort of recap, over the past couple of weeks we talked a little bit about what Satan does and how he operates, I think is the best way to put it. We talked a little bit about some of that. We talked about how basically Satan has done a good job of convincing people that he's not a threat. And if you are convinced that something is not a threat, then you don't take it seriously. You're not worried about it. And that's what Satan has done a good job of. And he's really done that. He's convinced the world that he's not a threat, and therefore they don't take him very seriously as far as a threat goes. But we learned a little bit about him like that, and we learned who he is and what he's like. We read some scriptures last week about some of what Ezekiel and Isaiah say about him as far as his character traits and things like that. And we also looked at what some other scriptures talked about in regards to descriptions of who he is and what they say and sort of what he does. And tonight we are in Job chapter 1, and we're going to look at where Satan's domain is. Okay, so look at verse 7 with me in Job chapter 1, and this is going to give us really all we need to know about where Satan is at. And it says in Job 1:7, it says, "And the Lord said to Satan, 'From where do you come?' So Satan answered the Lord and said, 'From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking back and forth on it.'" And so basically right here what we see is that Satan's domain, or Satan's current address, so to speak, is here amongst us. And we'll see a little bit more about what the Bible tells us about that in a moment. One interesting thing is that in 1871, there was a man in Pennsylvania who sued Satan and his minions for putting obstacles in his life and causing his downfall. So the man actually went through the effort to hire a lawyer and to actually bring a suit against Satan because of the trouble he caused in his life. As you can guess, the case was not heard really. The case was thrown out of court on the grounds that the defendants did not reside in the state. And so the Pennsylvania judge, way back in 1871, threw the lawsuit out because they didn't reside in the same state. Now here's the thing. Evidently that man was not a Bible scholar. He had realized that he's here on earth. And if that's the case, you never know when he might be passing through Pennsylvania. But it'd probably be hard to get any damages out of Satan. So anyway, that's a true story about a particular lawsuit. But there's a man named Cotton Mather who said, "God indeed has the devil on a chain, but has horribly lengthened out that chain." And that's really the case, is that Satan is, although he is limited by God, even though he is nowhere near as powerful as God, even though he was created by God and is now has rebelled against God and is now roaming the earth, he is on a chain. He is on a chain, but it is a very long chain. He's got access a long ways. Now, this verse that we just read a few moments ago from Job chapter 1, verse 7, this particular verse tells us right there, it says that when confronted about where he was coming from, where he had been, Satan said that he was basically on the earth, going back and forth, going throughout the earth. And this particular story is the opening credits, so to speak, to the book of Job and to the story of Job, and how Job is a good, upright man, a man that was of no comparison in the world at that time, not only morally, but financially and in many other ways. And so the devil, as we read in Job chapter 1, he comes and he makes himself present in the presence of God and the angels. And when the angels come to present themselves before God, it says, Satan basically tagged along. And when he gets in front of him, this is the comment that God asked of him. He asked him, or the question he asked, he says, where do you come from? And that's what his answer is. I come from the earth, basically. That's where he was at. And we read last week a little bit about his battle in heaven, trying to overthrow God, and how God threw him out of heaven, how he was cast to earth. But here is the thing. There are so many people that are misinformed, I guess you would say, about Satan. As I said, there's a lot in the world that don't take him very seriously. They see him as the little red suited, pointy-eared, pointy-tailed man with a pitchfork, and that's all they see of Satan. That's their only real consideration of him, and that it's almost like we see in the cartoons, not something to be really worried about. And that's the view that so many have. But not only is that view messed up, that view is completely wrong, but the view of where Satan resides and his position of leadership where he resides. See, there are a lot of people who believe that Satan, right now is just basically in hell, that he's stoking the fires of hell. And as you see in the old Tom and Jerry cartoons and others, sitting there poking people with a pitchfork in hell. And the truth of the matter is, we just read in Job chapter 1 that does not refer to him as being in hell. And so Satan does not live in hell. And the other aspect of that is, he is not currently and never will be the master of hell. That's what we see. That's the sort of the common view of Satan, is that he's the one that will be in charge of hell, and that's his domain, that's his, that is his kingdom, and he will torture people, and he'll do all these different things. And that's not even close to what the Bible tells us about him. And so we see, though, that he's not currently in hell. He's not going to be the master of hell. But the Bible tells us that he prowls around, as 1 Peter 5:8 says, like a roaring lion. We looked at that as one of the descriptions of him a few weeks ago. But it tells us that he is seeking whom he may devour. And that's basically what he's doing. He's looking to try and find those that he can prey on, those that he can pull away from the faith and destroy their faith or cause them to doubt. I read, as I was trying to find an illustration to share tonight, like I did with the lawsuit, I read one particular illustration that said, gave the fictional story that Satan was having a yard sale and was selling all of his tools that he used to cause problems with the world. And someone asked how much he would take for the wedge of doubt. And he said he won't take a dime for it because he can get back into business with that. And really that's what he does. He uses things like doubt. He uses other things that will draw us away from God. And what he does is he prowls around like that roaring lion, ready to pounce on those that are weak spiritually, those that are falling behind, or whatever the case may be. Think about that illustration that Peter uses there. He uses the idea of a lion. If you've ever watched National Geographic or some Discovery Channel show where the lion and the pack of lions are hunting wildebeest or zebras or whatever, they don't go and chase down the fastest and the strongest. No, they go find the ones that have issues. They go and find whether they're the really young in faith, let's look at it that way, or they'll go and find the ones that are struggling with their health or spiritual health, if you want to look at it that way. And that's what the lion does. It goes and takes down the ones that they can easily take and pull away from the group, pull away from the rest. And we see that as a real representation of the church, that the ones that can most easily fall victim. I'm not saying they're the only ones, but the ones that can most easily fall victim to Satan's tactics are those that are maybe really young in the faith, maybe not developed in their faith, may not know a lot about what Satan's tactics are or what they need to do to grow closer to God, or possibly those who have basically become spiritually unhealthy, whatever that may be. It could be any number of things. But that's the same thing. And what Satan does is he picks on those that he can pull away from the body of Christ. Not a particular church family, but the overall body. See, as we read, though, what we see here as we're looking about his domain and where he is working is we know it's here on earth, but presently, as the Bible tells us, he is the God of this world. And when I say God, I mean little g, meaning limited God, a false God, a God that is lesser than our God. But the thing we have to remember is that his days are numbered. You can read the book of Revelation, it ought to make you jump for joy when you read and see what God has in store for Satan in the final days. Because basically, I hope I don't ruin it for you, but in the book of Revelation, Satan loses. It's the long and the short of it. We win, he loses, Christ is victorious. That's the synopsis of the book of Revelation. Actually, the whole Bible. But what we see is that his days are numbered regardless. That there will be a day when he is finally defeated by Christ. And he has to deal with the punishment that comes along with that. But Christ, when his death on the cross basically earned the decisive victory over Satan. You hear about battles in the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, different things like that. And they'll say that this was a decisive battle that turned the tide of the war towards the North, or towards the colonies, or towards the Axis, or towards the Allies, or whoever it may be. And that's the way we ought to look at Jesus dying on the cross. That was the decisive victory in the war against Satan. Because when we think about it, we look through the Bible and we see so many times that Satan seemed so victorious in the Old Testament, where he was trying his best to destroy the promised line from Adam to Noah to Abraham to David and on down to Jesus. And we read throughout the scriptures, you read about people like Haman, you read about all these other things where people throughout the scriptures had tried their best to destroy that promised line. And basically they were puppets of Satan. I mean, it was his job trying to destroy that line so the Messiah couldn't come. So all of these battles have waged, and eventually you come to the time of the cross. Jesus dies on the cross, and that is the turning point. Even though it's been 2,000 years and Christ has not returned, we know that from what the scriptures tell us, this was that decisive moment. This was that decisive battle or victory over Satan that turned the tide in favor of Christ. And Christ being God, he wasn't going to be defeated anyway. But someday, what we know is that Satan will be confined to hell. You can read about it in Revelation, and I believe it's either chapter 19 or chapter 20. I didn't look that up. I wish I had. But either in Revelation 19:20, somewhere around in there, it tells you about Satan basically losing. I mean, he's defeated, and he is confined to hell. That he's not there by himself, and he's not there and in charge. He is there as a prisoner. He is there like everybody else. He's there with the fallen angels, and for those that do not have faith in Christ as their Lord and Savior. So those are the three occupants of hell. Satan, his demons, and those that do not have a relationship with Christ. And that includes the false prophet and the Antichrist. They fall under the third category because they are human. But we see that the Bible tells us that those are going to be the three occupants of hell. But the thing is, there is not a hierarchy there. They're all on equal footing when they go into hell. They're there to be tortured in hell as it is made to be. It's to be punishment. It's not to be a fun place. You know, I've heard preachers say for years, and it seems to be more evident the longer I'm alive, it makes more sense. But they said, somebody will say, well, I guess I'm going to hell. I'll be there with all my friends. But, there will be no friends in hell. There will be no fun in hell. It's not a big party and one thing and another. It is punishment as we've never experienced in this life. And that's what the Bible tells us. And so what we have to understand, though, is that victory over Satan, when it comes to the attacks that he brings into our life, even though we'll be talking more about how Satan is overcome next week, what we need to understand this week with tonight's devotional is that victory over Satan is not just about overcoming difficulty that we have during our life on earth. But what we can understand is that we can have victory over Satan while we're here. And when we do, we have to understand that we're not victorious over Satan or his attacks against us in and of ourselves. We'll never be strong enough, we'll never be smart enough, we'll never be super spiritual enough to defeat Satan in and of ourselves. We have to understand that the only way we can defeat Satan is to put into practice the teaching of Philippians 4:13, that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. It's through his strength that we're able to withstand the wiles of the devil, so to speak. And Ephesians chapter 6 tells us about the armor of God, and there is a reason we are to put that armor on. And if I remember right, and I'm going completely off the cuff here, isn't it the shield of faith that extinguishes the fiery darts of our enemy? And that's what Satan is doing. He's throwing those darts of doubt, those darts of all these other options that he has to draw us away from God: fear, worry, anxiety, all of these things that he can pull from his quiver, so to speak, and shoot at us so that we are distracted, so that we are weakened spiritually, and we're easy prey for him and his demons. And so that's really what we see is the sole objective of Satan, is to basically use his power that he has right now here on earth to draw us away from God, to weaken us, to really try and destroy us spiritually. And so it's important that we understand where he's coming from. In Romans it talks about the principalities of the air. And basically what it's referring to is basically Satan as one of those principalities that we struggle against, because he is constantly after us. I've used this illustration or example more so on Wednesday night and Sunday night than I have on Sunday mornings, because I'm able to go a little more in depth on Sunday nights or Wednesday nights. But I've told you, even when we were talking about the spiritual realm and heaven and hell and angels and things like that before, if we could take right now and pull back the veil between our reality and the spiritual realm, which sounds like a whole bunch of mystical mumbo-jumbo. But basically what there is the reality that we live in, and then there's the spiritual realm. We understand that. That's where God lives. That's where God exists, where heaven is, where hell is, and all of that. But if we were to pull back that veil, to pull back that curtain between the two, we could see this constant struggle of, if you want to call it good and evil, but really what it is between God and his angels and Satan and his demons. Now, we have to understand that it's simply a struggle by definition. We understand that God is all-powerful, that God could end it in an instant. But because of his plan, as defined throughout the Scriptures and more explicitly in the book of Revelation, we understand that part of God's plan, part of his overall happenings here on earth, is to allow Satan for a time to have his run of the place. And basically, if we were to pull back that veil that I was talking about, we would be able to see into the spiritual realm, and we could see God on his throne, high and lifted up, as Isaiah describes. But we can also see not only his angels worshiping him, we would not only see those loved ones who were believers in Christ, who are already on the other side in heaven with God, in the presence of Christ and in the presence of God. We would not only see them, but we would also see the struggle going on between God's angels and Satan's demons and Satan himself. Because what they are doing is, Satan is doing his best to try and destroy us, to draw us away from God. And that's never clearer than we read about in the book of Daniel. In the book of Daniel, if you remember, there is a time where Daniel was in prayer, and he was really bothered by what he had seen in one of his visions. And in that vision, he was really bothered by it. And so he spends time in prayer. And as he does that, he basically requested an answer, or he prayed, and God immediately sent an angel, I believe it was Gabriel, if I remember right, to go and answer the prayer. But he is detained by one of Satan's demons, as we read about in the Scriptures. And why is that? Because in the spiritual realm, there is this constant struggle. There is this constant influx of moving from one side to the other, and this constant battle between Satan and those demons against the angels of God. And those demons are the ones that cause the problems for Satan, or alongside of Satan, I guess I should say. And so, that being said, that's his whole objective here, is to do all he can to draw people away from God and to truly make them end up in hell with him. You know, you've heard the phrase before, somebody is fighting a losing battle and they go down swinging, or they're going to take everybody down with them as they go, so to speak. That's basically what Satan is trying to do. Because his goal is to destroy those relationships, to destroy any chance someone has at trying to start a relationship with Christ, and to draw people away from God, as we've already talked about. But one of the objectives of that is that he is trying his best to fill up hell with people besides him. And that's what we see, is that is the only benefit for him, I guess you would say, of the job that he has to do. He gets to see pride and jealousy and all these other sins tear people apart, and eventually draw them away from God, or keep them distanced from God to where they never start a relationship with him. And what does that mean? That means they end up in hell after the judgment alongside of him and alongside of his demons. And so that is tonight's devotional on where Satan's domain is from Job chapter 1. Next week we have revival. But the week after that, we will conclude this particular devotional on how is Satan overcome. And we'll look at it, ironically, Ephesians chapter 6, where it talks about the armor of God. And so we'll be in Ephesians chapter 6 and looking at that next time we're together in here on Wednesday night.